Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's webinar. So glad that you're here with us. We're going to wait just a minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. While you're waiting, why don't you go ahead and type your name in the chat, tell us where you're coming from, and maybe one question that you have about water. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Kira, if you want to advance to the next slide. Welcome, welcome. My name is Katie Maxwell. I'm a communications coordinator with Faith in Place. And I'm joined today by Ramont Bell, our program director, also known as Ray. And behind the scenes is our communications director, Kira, who's running all of the tech. I want to give her a big shout out as well. So let's keep going. We're going to first start off with our vision. Faith in Place has a vision of all diverse people of all faiths leading the environmental movement toward justice. And our mission is to empower Illinois people of all faiths to be leaders in caring for the earth, providing resources to educate, connect, and advocate for healthier communities. And today we're going to be focusing and centering that vision and mission on water justice and this question of, is my water safe? It's a very complex question with lots of problems that we'll get into in a bit. And let's go to the next slide to talk for a moment about our agenda for this evening. So we're going to focus a lot of our time today on lead pipes, the history and use of lead pipes, and why they're unsafe, what makes them unjust. We're going to talk about what we can do to protect ourselves from lead poisoning. And we're also going to update you on some advocacy developments that have happened since the last time we had a water justice webinar. And then we're going to close us out with some ways to act and some other water topics to watch and keep in mind. So let's go to the next slide. And we are going to start off by watching a video from WBEZ. Kira is going to cue that up in just a moment. And this video is a really great overview of the history of lead pipes, especially in Chicago. So let's go ahead and watch that. It's about 5 minutes long, and then we'll circle back. Great. Thank you so much for that, Kira. So let's just do a really quick recap, because I think the final scene from that video it pulls at my heartstrings, that if we don't do something, it's the children that are going to be most affected, because children under 6 are most at risk, though no amount of exposure to lead for anybody is safe. And most mayors, up until our current mayor in Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, have ignored the problem. And we're going to talk in a little bit about what Mayor Lightfoot is doing. But it is a massive problem, because the city has 400,000 lead service lines delivering water to 80% of Chicago's homes. And I want to pause really quickly. I noticed in the chat some folks were introducing themselves. That's great. And I want to especially call out Sam and Sarah and Gail, who are coming from Lincoln Park Presbyterian Church. They are our co-hosts for this webinar. We are so thankful for your support and for working with us on this event. So let's move to the next slide. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll have some time at the end to go through those questions. So on this slide, we have a graphic that can help show you what it looks like for the infrastructure. And we have from our water treatment facilities, that water gets delivered to our homes in the water main, which is under the street. And that water main is connected to our homes via the service line. And that service line, if your home was built before 1987, is more than likely made of lead. And then that line connects to your pipes, which may also be made of lead. So there's a lot of potential for lead exposure. And one other thing I want to call out in this graphic is the dotted line that you see bisecting the service line, because on the left-hand side, that shows the utility portion, and the right-hand side that shows the homeowner portion. And in some instances, there may be a partial service line replacement suggested where the utility would replace the line up to the property line. But that actually can be more unsafe than replacing the whole thing, because it can disrupt lead in the system and increase the levels of lead for a period of time after that. So we really want to try to avoid partial line replacements and look at full service line replacements. Let's go to the next slide. So not only is it part of the infrastructure of our homes and is significantly affecting Chicago, it's also affecting every county in Illinois. So across the state, we know that there are 686,000 lead service lines, and there are potentially 1 million more made of materials that we don't know about. So this graph here, or this map, shows the impact and how that distributes throughout the state. Let's go to the next slide. Because that distribution is really important when you start to think about justice. And WBEZ has been investigating this for quite a while. You can see this is one article of many that they have published. This one was published in November of 2020, showing that people of color in Illinois are more likely to live in communities with lead pipes. And in that article, they spoke to a graph, and that graph is on the next slide, which was put together by the Metropolitan Planning Council. And in this graph, you can see that Black and Latinx communities are 65% more likely to have lead service lines in their neighborhoods than white communities at 30%. So it's a really drastic difference, and is just one of several inequities that we're seeing. We're also seeing another inequity. If you want to go to the next slide, Kira, this is actually relatively new. Metropolitan Planning Council and Elevate Energy just published a report yesterday on January 18th called the City of Chicago Water Affordability Analysis, where they found that majority Black neighborhoods in Chicago have a water debt 10 times higher than majority white areas in the city. We're all experiencing higher water bills, but the level of inequity is pretty stark here. And just adding on to that, non-metered customers pay more for their water because it's an estimate of the water usage rather than an exact number. So with that, those are just some of the problems that we're seeing. And I'm going to pass it over to Ray, who's going to talk about some of the solutions that you can implement in your home.
Hello, again, this is Ray Bell. I am the Director of Programs for Faith in Place, and what can we do? Some solutions. Next slide, please. One of the first things we can do is we can verify if you have a lead service line, a lead pipe in your house. And actually, this is a picture of the service line in my house, and I do have a lead service line in my house. You can see how the pipe is bent in a little funny, peculiar way, and how it's kind of oblong at one end and not the other. It's not your regular steel pipe or copper or PCV pipe. So PVC, excuse me. So this is a lead line going into my house, and it's easy to identify. You can actually scrape it with a pen or with a penny or something like that. It will mark where the other ones won't. So the basically, if you find where it's in a peculiar shape, you usually probably have a lead service line in your house. So I've noticed that I do have a lead service line pipe going into my house. Next slide, please. Some of the things you can do to reduce the lead exposure in your home. You can replace the lead service line, as we talked about, Katie talked about before, and I'll also talk about a little more later. You can replace the lead service lines and pipes if possible, quite expensive. You can actually continually clean your faucet aerators on a regular basis. You want to take the aerators off and clean the little particles out that accumulate in the aerators. You can replace the faucet with a faucet filtration system. This Brita is one of the particular kinds you can use to replace the aerators to filter the lead out. Next slide, please. You can also go and get a source under the sink. This is what I put in under the sink of my house, and you see I labeled it the day I put it in. So this is good for a year, and this is after March after put it in, and we want to make sure that you use the NS53 certified filters, and the NS is a national standard format, and the 53 is for health effects. It's the American National Standard Institute. So you want to get that proper filter, and like I said, I did not even know I had a lead service line in my house until I was asked to look into this project, which is about a year ago. So I had no idea up until a year ago. So, and probably many of you probably don't have an idea also. One of the other things you can do is use cold water, flush the water. Make sure you flush the water a little bit before you start using. If you're cooking, let the water run a little bit before you put your pot into there to cook or drinking. So you want to flush the water before use. And in Chicago, you can call 311 and ask for a lead service testing kit, a free kit. They will send it out to you with instructions on how to use that particular kit. So just call 311 and get that service testing kit. Next slide, please. Chicago, the lead service line replacement programs. They are programs, and it's home initiated. There's a program, and so if you're a homeowner and you want to hire a contractor to remove the existing service line, the city will waive the permit fees for the project, which is normally around $3,000. The city will come out and attach a new service line to the water main, their end, and they will install a free water meter if there isn't one already. So you will have to pay for your portion from your house to the service line. The city will pay for their portion back from the service line back to the main line. Unfortunately, this price is running around between $3,000 and $6,000 to do this replacement. So it's quite expensive, and it's, like I said, it's home initiated, and it's for the cost of the homeowner. So it's quite expensive, but that's what you want to do. Next slide, please. Again, the Chicago lead service replacement programs. They actually have one that's an equity lead service line replacement program. It's free, full replacement for the water main into the home, and a free water main. So the city is actually paying for this one. And it's if you live in your own home, if your water's metered, and also if you have a household income of 80% of the median income, which in Chicago right now is $72,800 for a family of 4. You get free water testing results from the department. of management, and they will actually test to see if you are 15 points per parts per billion of lead in your water. So, and you also have to have 15 parts per billion of lead in your water to get into this particular program. Next slide, please. And these are abysmal replacement numbers. The Chicago program put most of the cost burden on the homeowners, and it will take decades to complete. Out of 400,000 lead service lines, Chicago Mayor Lightfoot plans to replace about 650 per year. So you think if it's 400,000 and we're only planning putting money aside for 650 a year, you know, it's going to take forever to do that. And last year, in the year 2021, only 20 were replaced in that particular time period. Okay, next slide, please. There's no reason to wait. 17 billion from the federal infrastructure bill will come to Illinois. 1.7 billion is allocated to improve drinking water and wastewater and infrastructure throughout Illinois. Illinois will get some additional money in about 5 years. We don't know exactly how much that additional money will be, but replacing the 686,000 known lines in Illinois will take billions of dollars, and that's a lot more than it's been allocated, but there's no reason to wait any longer. We must act, and that's what this action is about. Next slide, please. Advocacy updates. I can't say that word. Okay.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to wait, especially because we have federal funding coming to resolve this problem. And we also have some exciting updates from the last legislative session. So if you want to go to the next slide, the big one is that the Illinois legislature passed the Lead Service Line Replacement and Notification Act. It was signed into law on August 30th of 2021 and just became effective on January 1 of this year, making Illinois the third state after Michigan and New Jersey to require full lead service line replacement. And this is really, really important that we have some political will behind this important problem. Let's go to the next slide because we have a little bit on the provisions in this act. Specifically, it's creating a replacement fund, it's creating an advisory board, and it's also requiring a low-income water rate assistance program. So there's some justice pieces built into this, and Faith in Place and Faith in Place Action Fund were instrumental in ensuring the passage of this act. Let's go to the next slide, because as this act gets implemented and as the federal funding comes to Illinois for infrastructure, including replacing lead service lines, this could significantly benefit our economy over the next 20 years. It's going to take a long period of time to replace the service lines. And so there's an opportunity for jobs. And at Faith in Place, we want to make sure that those jobs are distributed equitably so that communities that have been affected by this are included in that job creation. Let's go to the next slide. Something else water related to be keeping your tabs on in terms of advocacy is something called the Chicago Water for All Ordinance. This ordinance was introduced to the city by Alderman Daniel LaSpada in 2021 and is supported by a coalition led by the Southsiders Organized for Unity and Liberation. And this ordinance has 5 goals. So it wants to provide financial relief for low-income households, prohibit water privatization, which is something that as a city on one of the Great Lakes, we have this amazing resource, and there is some interest from private companies to privatize that water, as well as there are other cities around the country that have let private companies manage their water. And when they've chosen to do that, prices have skyrocketed for consumers. So we want to try to prevent that from happening. The ordinance also promotes requiring a plan to ensure equitable implementation of capital improvements, improving transparency about shutoffs, liens, and water debt. We believe that water is a basic human right and that we shouldn't not, we need to have access to it. So the focus of this bill is ensuring that also by banning water shutoffs, that people have access to the water that they need in order to survive. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can get involved with supporting this in a little while. And I'm going to pass it back to Ray to kind of talk about some of those ways to take action.
Okay. We talk about our program to take action. Now, one of the things that I did not mention before, I want to make sure I mention now, is that beware of when there's work being done outside your house and your service line is disturbed. In other words, if the city is actually doing work outside your house, or if you have a plumber doing some work and you actually shut the water off, what that does, because the city actually puts a chemical in the water that keeps the lead from the pipes from detaching and going into your water. But when the water is shut off, that system no longer works. And when you turn your water back on after it's been shut off, then there's a big rush of lead for a short period of time in your water. So be very, very careful about when the city disrupts the water, or if you have water disruption at all from a plumber, something that you're doing in your house. So be careful about that. Okay, we can advocate against water shutoffs. Right now, this slide talks about 10 months before that, in May of 2019, there were 2,700 households that had their water shut off. And we still are looking at hundreds of households that actually have their water shut off now. The Mayor Lightfoot actually put a moratorium actually on water cutoffs, excuse me, and the city can't go out and cut off your water for non-payment anymore. But that does not help the hundreds of people that actually had their water shut off and then don't have the funding to have their water shut back on. So there's hundreds, if not thousands of Chicagoans right now that have no water to their house. So that is one of the things we're going to advocate against going forward. Next slide, please. Okay. The Water for All ordinance, this is what Katie just spoke about. You can actually call your alder person and tell them that you support the Water for All Act. And this is a petition to sign, and we will drop these, we will drop the ways to get these petitions in the chat, and also an email later on for the people that were here, how they can get to these links going forward. Next slide, please. This is our new policy platform. This is a platform that we are promoting environmental health, climate change, clean water, economic justice, food access, and voting rights. Especially, I want to talk about the food access. We actually have a grant now, a $7,000 grant that we are giving to houses of worship to help them with food access. If you actually have a program for food access, you can put your application in for that $7,000 grant. We're going to give out 25 of those this year, and the date for that grant will be January 31st. So go on our website and look for that food access grant. Next slide, please. New face policy platforms. Faith in Place supports policies that help communities that suffer most. Follow leadership of communities on the front lines of crises, dismantle systematic racism, hold legislators accountable, build wealth pathways for communities most harmed by environmental pollution, that address mass incarceration, and preserve the environment. Those are our policy platforms going forward. Next slide, please. We want to advocate for equitable jobs. We want to call your state legislator to ensure jobs for lead service lines replacement include residents of the community that are hit the hardest. Next slide, please. Water pollution and urban flooding. Water pollution and urban flooding disproportionately affect Black and brown communities. We have some Black and brown communities in the Chicagoland area where there is as little as 1 inch of rain can actually flood the streets in certain areas, and it's pretty bad. So we want to advocate for justice for those areas going forward. Next slide. We have a program where we install rain gardens to reduce the flooding. It benefits and adds beauty to habitat and for pollinators, holds soil in place, reduces corrosion. The water soaks into the ground rather than overwhelming the streets and the sewers. Here is a rain garden that we placed in Chicago at Greenstone Methodist, United Methodist Church. We put that one in 2017, and that particular rain garden right there actually keeps about 74,000 gallons of water from going into the combined sewer system a year to help mitigate flooding in that area. And we place about 5 of those, and the rain gardens that we place a year, they annually between 700 to 900,000 gallons a year of water that is not going into the sewer system going forward, and helps mitigate flooding in those particular areas. Next slide, please. We have a program called Our Grandchildren's Water. Water is precious. It's the only water we have. You can lead your house of worship in this flexible multi-faith water curriculum. It comes in a 1-week format or a 4-week format, or we have one in a 7-week format, and these are free and available. You can lead this in your house of worship. If you have a green team, then we can actually help you with the leading in that, if that's something that you want to do going forward. So you can just email me or just go on our website. You can actually download it. Next slide, please. Water topics to follow. The state water plan is revised every 10 years. It's currently being updated. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources Task Force holds monthly meetings on water. World Water Day is March 22nd. So you can plan on doing something. There are a lot of activities on that day. And you have to remember that 2.2 billion people worldwide actually live without water. And there are actually, right now in the United States, there are 2 million people that actually live without access to running water in their house, indoor plumbing, and waste treatment. About 2 million people still in the United States that do not have running water, indoor plumbing, or wastewater treatment systems in their house today. Next slide, please. Back to Katie.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. And we have some time for Q&A. So I've noticed some questions that are populating in the chat, so I can go ahead and read those out, and Ray and I can share in answering them for you to the best of our ability. So we have one question about how have other cities that use lead extensively in the same period as Chicago adapted to reduce this problem? What tools of political power were effective in moving people to see the seriousness of acting to replace lead pipes?
I can start. I know a few locations, especially there, like one in West Chicago has done this, and I know in Milwaukee, where there were other groups that pushed their elected officials about how bad the problem was, and elected officials, they actually took it on in both of these cases. They took it on for that the city would actually handle the funding. Like in Milwaukee, they have a location that anytime the city actually does any work within a given neighborhood, they have to replace all the lead service lines in that area that they are working in. And they actually give the homeowners a low interest loan, extremely low interest loan that they can pay back within like 10 to 20, 10 to 20 years. So it's a very low cost to the homeowner. And I think the West Chicago has a similar place, but most of the other locations, the cities and the elected officials have stepped up and realized that the city has to play a major part into getting this done and not to put the onus on the homeowner.
Yeah, absolutely. I think political will has a lot to do with how effectively and how efficiently cities can change this around. You know, as we saw in the video that we shared with you earlier, studies were as early as the 1920s were showing the disparate health impacts of lead, and cities even then were starting to change their practices. But today, there are cities like Denver that are doing it really efficiently because there's political will to raise point. And they're actually doing it in a really cost-effective manner as well, incorporating it into their street replacement and infrastructure plans. And I think Chicago has intentions to do that starting in 2023, when its current cycle of water main replacements ends and they start a new one. But Chicago clearly has a long way to go in terms of making it more efficient and making it less costly and less burdensome on homeowners. One of the WBEZ articles we shared in the chat that just came out talked about how Chicago not only is replacing these at a really, really slow rate, but is also doing it in a way that is quite disruptive to the street and could be a lot more efficiently done as compared to other cities around the country. So our next question is about filtration. And this person says, Brita filters seem to be pretty popular these days. Are they at all effective in filtering out lead?
This is Ray. I did some reading on this, especially since I do have the lead service line in my house. And I went, and my understanding was that the NS 53 filter was the best one, and it takes out like 99.59% of the lead in your house, and it's supposed to be extremely effective. So that's the one I have, and that from my research, yes, it does. But you got to use it. You know, the thing about it, it's on the cold water side, so you have to make sure that when you're cooking, you're starting out with cold water and your drinking water. So it's not on the hot water side. So it's on the cold water side. So yes, it works if you use it. Yes, my understanding is that.
Yeah, echoing Ray, a filter has to have that certification in order to ensure that it will filter out the lead. And I don't think that all Brita filters do filter out lead, so you do have to check what kind of filter you're using. What are the alternative materials for these kinds of pipes, and are they tested to be safe for water in the long term? That is also a good question. Ray, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, the replacement they're using now is mostly PVC, and then sometimes in the house is copper.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So and so it's PVC and copper. So and so far they are pretty safe. They're also looking at sometimes how much copper ends up in the water, but it's nowhere near the issue of lead right now. And most of the replacements have been PVC.
Yeah. And I'm seeing a comment from Ashlyn Stillwell, who was on our board. Hi, Ashlyn. She says it's important to replace filters regularly. Yes. Someone else said or shared that they requested a testing kit from the city of Chicago and never received one. I'm so sorry. Maybe try again. Persistence always helps, I think, with the city. Ray mentioned the sustainable food grant that we have open right now, and we actually just extended the deadline to February 7th. So if you are interested in applying, we encourage you to do so. Go check it out on our website. The link is in the chat, and it's exciting that you'll have a little bit of extra time to fill that out.
Yeah, and as Ashwin said, yes, you need to change your filters regularly. That's why if you notice when I put my filter in, I put the date that I installed it, so I know that was a 1-year filter, so I know I have to replace it before that date. So when you need to put a little note on your filter, so you'll know what date to replace it.
Mm-hmm. We also have another question. Do renters have any real control over this issue aside from advocacy?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think you can advocate to your landlord, and you can also, as you say, go to 311 and get the water tested. I mean, and if it tests above 15 parts per billion, then your landlord or the homeowner has to do something about that. If it tests like that, there is a must. Now you have legal information that will require something to be done right away.
Yeah, that is a really good question. Any other questions? Yes. So the question there, we have a new question. Is the 3-1 number 24/7? I believe so. Is that?
I believe it is also.
Feel free to keep dropping your questions in the chat. This is not water related, but I just wanted to point out the picture in our Q&A slide here. This is the whole staff gathered together just before the holidays in Central Illinois at this beautiful mansion called the Allerton Mansion. And this is all of us gathered here to say thank you. Thank you for your support, and thank you for showing up on a Wednesday in January when you could be doing anything else with your time. We really appreciate that you want to join us to talk about water and our health and safety and all of the other things that we advocate for here at Faith in Place. I'm seeing no more questions, so we could go ahead on to the next slide. If you do have another question, happy to stick around. But before we let you all go a bit early, we wanted to again say thank you, to encourage you to connect with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We also have a YouTube channel, and this event will be published on our YouTube channel later. So if you have a friend who wasn't able to join, you can direct them to that video in a little bit, in a few days. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Ray or myself. These are our emails, ramont@faithinplace.org and katie@faithinplace.org. You can also reach out to our general box, which is info@faithinplace.org. Let's go to the next slide. And I just want to say one final thank you to not just those of you here in the audience, but also a thank you to our partners, Soul, Faith in Place Action Fund, especially Elevate, and Metropolitan Planning Council. Thank you. Have a good one.